I'm sorry, I don't have a train story tonight. I was fortunate enough when I was growing up to spend 6 years in the Missouri Boot Heel with my grandmother and great-grandmother. I was there from the time I was age 4 until I turned 10, and then I came back to St. Louis. The houses that they have in the country, a lot of them used to set up on those old cinder or concrete blocks. Well, the one that we lived in sat on those blocks. And that made the house set up probably about 2.5 feet off the ground. Well, every day of every summer, whenever we wanted to go outside and play, my grandmother would always say, "Don't you all go under the house now." Now, we call that my grandmother a lot of times, so you'll hear me say, "Ain't Tanky." Don't ask me why Ain't Tanky. I think it's one of those country things. But anyway, I'll mention grandmother and Ain't Tanky. Well, anyway, she would always say that. But they never told us why we couldn't go under the house. So when you tell a child not to do something, we all know that means that they are going to do it. So I was 9 years old this particular year, and I decided at 9 years old that I could take care of myself. I could make all of my own decisions. I didn't need them to tell me what to do. I was a big girl. As a matter of fact, I decided I could take care of me and my 6-year-old cousin too. I was a big girl. I didn't need them to do that. So I decided also that I was going to ask my grandmother why. Normally, kids, when I was growing up, you didn't ask why. You just did as you were told. But not me. I grabbed my cousin by the hand and we went in the kitchen where my grandmother was cooking. And we walked in there. I said, Doris was supposed to be her name was Doris Faye, my cousin. I said, Doris was supposed to be my moral support. But when we got into the kitchen, Doris let go of my hand and she went around behind me and she started peeking out like this. And I'm thinking, I could feel her shaking like this. It's like she's supposed to be helping me and supporting me. She's back there shaking more than I was. So I looked at my grandmother. I said, "Hey, Tanky." And she said, yes. She didn't stop what she was doing. And I said, "Why can't we go out of the house?" When I said that, she stopped. And she turned around. And she looked at me and she looked at Doris. And she had that look on her face which made me think, uh-oh, I'm in trouble again. Said, "Snakes! That's why you can't go under the house. There's snakes up under the house. Now don't y'all go in the house now, under the house when you all go out and play. You hear me now?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And Doris and I both turned around and ran out of the kitchen as fast as we could. Well, as a child and even to this day, I never liked snakes and still don't like snakes. So when she told me that was enough for me. I decided that we were not going to go under the house. But I remembered all those years that when they told us not to go under the house, we walked around the outside of the house and we would peek under there. And we'd go to the other side and we would look under there. We never saw anything under there. So 2 or 3 days later, I'm still thinking about, there's nothing under the house. I don't know why they're saying that. I think all those grown folks got together and made up that don't go under the house business just to keep us from doing it. So one day I told Doris Faye, I said, "Doris Faye, we're going under the house." Doris Faye looked up at me. Poor Doris Faye. She said, "Okay." Now, Doris Faye, I always got her to do everything first, just in case we got caught. I could always say, "Doris Faye did it first." So you see, my brother was 3 years older than me, and he always blamed everything on me. So I thought it was okay and normal and natural for me to blame everything on Doris. So Doris said, "Okay." So as soon as we got a chance to, we went outside, we peeked under the house, went to the other side, we looked. We didn't see any snakes. I said, "Doris, you go under first and see if there's any snakes under there." Doris looked at me and she said, "But what if there's a snake under there?" I said, "Girl, have you ever seen a snake under the house?" She said, "Uh-uh, I said, there's not any snakes under the house. You go first and look and see if there's any under there. Okay. Doris Faye crawled under the house, and I got on my knees and I looked down. I said, you see any snakes? Doris Faye, there's not any snakes under here. The only thing I see is a few chickens crawling, walking around under here. I said, go a little farther, Doris, go a little farther. Doris Faye said, okay. And she went farther up under the house. You see anything? No, there's not any snakes under here. I told you that. I said, okay, I'm coming under. But I went to one side of the house to see if my brother was still playing over there, and he was. Then I walked to the other end of the house, and I listened to hear if my grandmother was still in the kitchen. She was. So everybody was where they were supposed to be. So I went up under the house. Doris Faye and I got up under the house, and we crawled around, and we looked, and we looked. And the only thing we saw under there was chickens. A nice cool breeze was coming under there, and we were thinking, why don't they want us to come under here and play? There's not any snakes under here. So for the next week, every day when we went outside, we would slip under the house. We never stayed long because we didn't want to get caught by my grandmother, or we didn't want my brother to see us. So after about a week, we were so used to slipping under there, we forgot all about my brother seeing us. The only thing we were worried about then was we didn't want a tanky to catch us under there. So we would slip under, we play for a little while, then we would come out. And then one day, about 2.5 weeks later, Aunt Tanky told us she had to go in town to take care of some business. And she told us that my brother was in charge. Now, I hated whenever she left my brother Junior in charge, because he would always get me into trouble. And he did exactly that day. So as soon as she left to go in town, I said, Doris Faye, we're going under the house. Doris said, okay. So we watched Aunt Tanky go down the road. Junior ran off to the other side of the house to play. So he was in the front in this corner playing. We were in the back in this corner plotting how long we could stand there and where we could go. So when we got up under the house, I peeped out to see if Junior was still over there, and I could see him running over there playing. Then we made sure we had a good view of the road, so when Aunt Tanky came back, we could see her too. So once we got our plan together and we knew that she was gone and he was playing, we started having fun. I said, Doris, we can stay under here as long as we want to today. And Tanky's not here and Junior's over there playing. And she said, okay. So we started crawling around on our hands and knees. We were playing and chasing each other and just laughing and talking. And we were so excited because we didn't have to rush from up under the house. We could play under there all day, all the afternoon if we wanted to. So we were playing and playing. We forgot all about my brother. We forgot all about watching for Aunt Tanky. And we just kept playing and running around. And all of a sudden, we crawled into this one corner. And there, in that one corner on one of those cinder blocks, was a big black snake. And he was sitting there all curled up. And he was staring right at me. I looked at Doris. Doris looked at me. And before we knew it was, ah! And we both took off running. We crawled so fast, we hit each other, we knocked each other down. We got up and we started crawling out of there. We went this way, the snake went that way. And we thought we were safe when we got to the edge of the edge where we were almost outside. And we said, come on, Doris, come on, Doris. And we crawled and crawled. We got there, we thought we were safe. But who did we crawl into? Not Junior, but Aunt Tanky. There she was. Uh-oh, she had that look on her face. She looked down at us, but she surprised me. She was good at switching things around. She said, you girls okay? We said, yes, ma'am, we all right. Go sit on the corner of that porch. Didn't I tell you not to go into that house? Yes, ma'am. And we ran out and sat on the corner of the porch. She called my brother, and by then, he ran around the corner of the house. She said, go get the garden hoe. He went and got the garden hoe. They came around to the other side, went around to the other side of the house. They found the snake, and they killed the snake. Then, now while they were back there looking for this snake and killing this snake, Doris Faye and I were sitting on the corner of the porch. When we first sat down there, I thought, oh, I'm in big trouble now. I'm in trouble again. The corner of the porch is where she always sent me to think about the things I was doing. So I sat there and I was thinking, okay, what is she going to do to me today? I didn't know. Then after a while, I started thinking. I said, Doris Faye. She said, what? I said, I don't think we're in any trouble. Now, we had disobeyed my grandmother. I said, I don't think we're in any trouble. I said, do you know if we hadn't found that big black snake for them, they wouldn't have been able to kill it? Doris Faye said, oh. I said, so they should thank us, because if it wasn't for us, they wouldn't have found that big black snake. Doris said, oh. So by the time my grandmother and my brother came back, we were sitting there like, oh, we're okay. They're going to thank us. We helped them find that big black snake. They were able to kill it. But when my grandmother came back, she laid the hoe against the house, and she asked my brother, didn't I tell you to watch those girls? My brother said, yes, ma'am, I told them to stay right here and play on the corner of the house where I could see them when I went over there to pull the weeds that you told me. I looked at Doris, and Doris looked at me. He was not pulling weeds over there. He was playing. But we couldn't say anything. We couldn't tell her that. And he said, but they didn't do it, and I told them to stay here. And he gave her that look, and my grandmother looked at him and smiled and said, okay, baby, we'll go back and finish pulling the weeds then. We didn't believe it. Then she turned to us. After she screamed at him, I thought, well, maybe we're not okay. She turned to us, and she looked down at us, and I was expecting her to scold us like mad. But instead, she shook her head and said, And she grabbed us in her arms, and she held both of us tight. She said, oh, you girls are so lucky. You all don't know how lucky you are today. Why, just the other day, Mr. Fred told me that his little granddaughter, she was about your size, Doris Faye, that she was swallowed up by this big snake that came from down yonder, from that river. So that big snake just swallowed her girl right up. You girls sure is lucky today that wasn't the same snake. Now, the one we killed, he looked just like the one Mr. Fred told me about, but I don't think he was quite as big as that one. So that other big snake is still out there. You girls sure is lucky today. And we stood there. When she told us that, our eyes got this big, and our hearts started pounding. I looked at Doris, Doris looked at me, and we thought, oh my goodness, there's another snake out there, and it's bigger than the one that they just killed. So, needless to say, she didn't scold us that afternoon. She just didn't say anything to us. She just hugged us and told us how lucky we were that we hadn't been eaten up by that big snake. Well, Doris Faye and I, we went on in the house after that. For about 3 weeks, or a little bit longer, we didn't ask my grandmother if we could go outside and play. We stayed in the house because I was afraid that big black snake, bigger than the one they had killed, was out there waiting to eat up my little cousin. And I didn't want that snake to do that. So we stayed in the house. And then finally, after about 3.5 weeks, I started thinking, well, maybe we can go out and play just a little bit. So I went, grabbed Doris Faye by the hand again. We went to where my grandmother was, and I told her, I promised her that we were going to be good girls, and that we were not going to go under the house again. And I told her when we go outside to play, we were going to play in the yard and not up under the house. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and Doris stood there beside me that time. And she smiled at me, and we smiled at her, and then we looked, and then I told her, I said, because I don't want that big black snake to eat up Doris Faye like it did Mr. Fred's niece. So we promise you we won't go under the house again, and we're going to be good girls all summer long. And so my grandmother looked at us and smiled. As I was walking out the kitchen, I said, Doris Faye, after all, I said I would try. I didn't say we were going to be. And before the summer was over, we were out and into something else. But that's another story. I'll share that one with you next time. Thank you. Thank you.